why are you running for governor?
Well, why I'm running for governor is really in large part because of the big issues facing South Carolina. I see the overriding issue right now in this state is a complete lack of leadership moving forward. And if you think about the important substantive issues, their job creation, their education and accountability in government, and then the crying need for some health care reform and lower premiums for health care related to the cigarette tax. Most of those things people know are a problem, but we're not making any progress on them. The reason we're not making any progress on them is because we have a complete lack of leadership within state government. And you see that from the governor's office, you see that from the legislature in large part. And I've served in the legislature just long enough to know what the major problems are facing our state, but not long enough to have given up hope and become frustrated. And I'm incredibly optimistic that we've got a chance here, a narrow window of opportunity to really move the state forward, and that's why I'm running for governor, and I'm excited about it. Things that we need to do broadly, I like to look backwards and see what worked, and then I like to look forward and see what's coming and what we need to embrace to do things a little bit differently. We know what's worked in the past, and that's been an aggressive governor with energy and a willingness to reach out to business within the state and outside the state to recruit it into South Carolina, and that's something I'm deeply committed to doing. You just look back at what Governors McNair or Riley or Campbell did, and they were able to project an image of competence and an image of welcomeness into the state of South Carolina. Clearly we need to be doing that. We haven't been doing it, and that's something I want to do as governor. And then we look forward and what's changing and what can we embrace to bring jobs into the state. And there are two big sectors really that we're not taking the opportunities in that present themselves. One is in the growth in the healthcare industry. We've got the medical university we really could capitalize on. We've got two-year colleges that are ready to train up nurses and medical technicians that are right now waiting. People are waiting to come in to get that education when we could have them going to work, earning good dollars immediately. So we look in that field, and then in the energy sector where clearly South Carolina's got a potential with wind, nuclear, and also with biofuels that we ought to be emphasizing, we ought to be embracing to create jobs within South Carolina. It's not just about having alternative energy. That's a great thing, and I'm supportive of it, but it's also a great opportunity to create jobs. When we talk about jobs, we have to look out into the rural areas of South Carolina as well, where they're so desperately needed, along with the urban areas. And there are opportunities in both of those fields. We have to have a governor who's going to be aggressive and is very serious about job creation. And I would say that if your philosophy is that government can't be involved in these things or shouldn't be involved in these things, then you get the results we've had over this last decade. But if you have a philosophy that government should be involved in job recruitment and job creation, then we'll see some big changes, and that certainly is the proper role for a progressive and aggressive government to play. And as the chief executive, I'm really committed and excited about those opportunities. Great question, and really education is where my heart is. I grew up as the son of a school teacher, and my dad was involved in higher education, and my kids go to the same public schools that I did 25 years ago in Camden, which is a rural and suburban area of the state with those schools. So I know firsthand what's going on within our schools, and there's some great successes, as you mentioned. There are also some serious problems. Part of the problem we've had the last decade is we've been defending public schools instead of trying to put positive things in place to move them forward. And when you're on the defense, it makes it much harder to progress and to move forward like South Carolina has to, because we're moving from a position where we've been a little behind other states in the past. So I look at specifics, what works and what doesn't work, and what's the most practical thing that we can do quickly to improve public education, and what are the long-term changes that need to occur. I really approach this as the son of a school teacher from what my mom did and knows and what I learned while I was in the schools that she was teaching in. And I see the most immediate need is to focus back in the classroom, and that means that we move away from this obsession we have on testing. We're going to still test, we need to test, but right now our teachers really are pushed to teach toward the test, to focus on the test, and we need to change that so they're more attuned to teaching and not simply testing. And the way you do that is by de-emphasizing the test and the role the test plays. It should be evaluative, should evaluate what's going on, but it shouldn't be the focus of what's going on within the schools, and I want to help to bring about that change in culture within the state. And also look in the classroom and say, as a father of twin boys and a third child who's going into third grade, what works and what doesn't. Well, what works is having smaller class sizes. I know that firsthand as a parent of kids in public schools. What works is having teachers who are the best that we can possibly have, and you get that in large part by paying them good money. Georgia pays on average $10,000 more per teacher than we do. We ought to focus on raising the salaries in the classroom, not in the administration, but in the classroom, so that we can continue to attract new teachers in who are incredibly high quality, which we can do. And then long term, what do? You focus on the areas we know we can make a difference. Dropout rate is an area we know we can make a difference. We've made some difference with some recent announcements. Statistically, we know that if we focus on dropout rates, we can reduce them substantially. We haven't done that in the last 5 or 6 years, and we've seen those rates continue to be a problem, although we've seen some good news over the last year in that we have to keep pushing those numbers down. And then probably the largest scale problem we have to address is equity in school funding. And again, looking into those rural counties and the poorer counties, many of which I represent in the Senate, some of which I represent in the Senate, we have to find a way, and I've put plans on the table in the past, and we'll continue to push ways to fund children's educational opportunities so that it doesn't depend on where they're born or where they live, but it just depends on the opportunities that we give them. In other words, if you live in Dillon County as a child, you should have substantially similar opportunities as if you were born in Kershaw County or if you live in Lexington County. If we don't level that playing field, raise up those who are not receiving the opportunities that other children are, we'll continue to lag behind. And that's a long-term problem, and it's going to take some long-term solutions, but we have to start somewhere, and now is definitely the time to start. Well, when did we make successes move forward in South Carolina? And it's been when governors stepped forward with a vision, and then they brought people together to achieve the goals. Dick Riley is a great example of that. John Carl West as governor was a great example of that. They had tremendous influence and an ability to change and progress within public education. And public education is not just K through 12. It also includes our higher education, our colleges and universities, where we've seen tuition skyrocket over the last decade. We're pricing many of our young people out of the ability to attend colleges, and that's an awful way to approach educational improvement within the state. We've forced our colleges to move away from accepting South Carolina students into their schools and accepting out-of-state students because they can receive more money. Terrible way to educate a population that needs to be lifted up and not pushed out of our higher education institutions. So if we keep doing things the way we're doing them, we're going to bring in more out-of-state students and less in-state students and drive up the cost of higher ed, while at the same time K through 12 is not as successful as it could be, and a governor who brings that vision forward that I'm talking about can really make a tremendous difference in South Carolina. The power of the governor is not just his structural role within our state government, but also that power to bring forth a new vision within the state that people buy into and that people will move forward on. And I'm incredibly excited about that. I think we've got a great opportunity. Healthcare is important. Of course, nationally there's a lot of debate on the healthcare, and I like to look on the local level, state level, what can we do? We've got the lowest cigarette tax by far in the nation. 7 cents a pack hasn't been raised in decades and decades, and I'm not a big proponent of raising a lot of taxes, but when you have one that's clearly out of whack with surrounding states, that encourages black market sales of cigarettes that are then smuggled into other states and sold by criminals, we've got something wrong. We ought to raise it to a reasonable amount and then use that money in health care to reduce health insurance premiums for people who work. And for small businesses like mine and like others that offer health insurance, because the cost continues to go up, and we ought to reward other small businesses that are willing to offer health insurance. That's something the state government could easily do. But getting back to what I started on, a lack of leadership has kept us from doing it. Step out. And I've talked about comprehensive tax reform for at least the last 7 years, and I'm passionate about the need for it. Our current structure is a disincentive to business growth. It clearly keeps industrial prospects at bay in some circumstances because we have a high property tax on industrial property. It also shifts the burden to average people because of loopholes within the sales tax system that need to be examined. Some close and some make rational sense. But we don't have a rational system as a whole, and I'm an advocate for comprehensive reform, and will continue to put forward plans to do so.